First of all, I'm just so glad to be speaking here in my hometown because I was welcomed by so many of you when I walked in the door. So thank you. Seeing my old friends and colleagues is really amazing because when you're rewired, you don't get to see all of your old colleagues. That's one thing you really miss. So I'm really glad to see everybody. Thank you for coming. I appreciate that. So who am I and who is Eileen? We're both court leaders. I'm a judge, like she said, or I was a judge for about 16 years. I call it rewiring because I rewired into a different career. So now I serve as the Judicial Wellness Program Manager for the State Bar here. So I handle all things judicial well-being, around judicial well-being for all of the local judges. I also when I was a judge, I will say that the reason I went into this leadership training with Eileen, we started our own business, Intuitive Leadership Institute. We started it with the thoughts that we both come from leadership perspectives, different ones. I was a chief judge, and in that role, running a court of over 325 people and 19 judges, I really was able to master some leadership skills as well as in some of my other roles. So I was really interested in how I can support everyone from this side. So I'm really glad to be able to do that for you today. I'm also an executive leadership coach, and I have my own business called High Road to Success, and so I actually coach judges and attorneys, actually nationally. So that's been a really exciting practice. And then I do wellness presentations for different states and different local organizations, but I also, with Eileen, we train on different leadership topics in different states. So we've just been busy, I guess I'll say that, but we're really glad to be here to support you today. Eileen.
Yeah, thank you, Judge. As Christine and Judge Ingles said, I'm Eileen Gerstenberger. I've had the privilege of being a court educator in both the state of Washington, as well as was recently the Director of Education in the state of Idaho. This year, I will become the incoming president for the National Association of State Judicial Educators, NASJA. And we are in an active partnership with NACM and some other associations, really brainstorming and trying to think really clear about how we can support each other, how we can learn from each other, share resources. So it is certainly a privilege to be here. So thank you for that.
I wanted to go back to who are you? So I want to do a hand raise. Let me ask you, how many of you are clerks of the court? Raise your hand. Okay. And we might all have different kind of nomenclature about who we are and what roles we serve. How about judges? How many judges do we have? Raise your hand.
Nice.
Okay. And how many supervisors, lead workers, anyone in a supervisor position? Raise your hand. Great. That's what I was thinking we would have. And for those of you that are here and maybe aren't yet in a supervisor role, I think this is going to be very helpful to you because I do think that just working for the court, we are public servants and we're on task and on display, I would say, most of the time. And I think that we have to bring that level of professionalism. So I'm really glad you're here and I hope you're aspiring to be a leader in your own court. Eileen.
Okay. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to take a look at our learning objectives. Good educators always let you know what we're going to accomplish today. So we're going to examine how work is changing during this era of rapid change and disruption. Just with a show of hands, how many of you feel like your courts in the last couple of years have really been changing a lot? Has it hit you yet? So you're feeling it. Okay, I thought so for sure. We're going to discuss why our leadership style matters. And we know that it matters all the time, but when we're in an era of disruption and change, we're responsible for not only helping those we supervise and lead, but really helping our colleagues just kind of manage it, figure out, how to maneuver, how to stay healthy, that kind of thing. And I think in courts, we recognize that sometimes things seem to change really fast and sometimes they slow down. It's not necessarily at the pace of private industry, especially moving forward here. We're going to identify ways that to use coaching as a leadership style to help our employees and our coworkers stay grounded, make adjustments that they need during this new era. So, has anyone heard that literally we are in a new era of time? We have. So, let's talk a little bit about what that means. So, just kind of looking back, there is a handout in your app that we're going to take a closer look at. It's quite detailed, so you might have to like expand it a little bit. But if we just look back to the mid 1800s, so I always like to think about that. 1850, well, it was those years in 1860 when Abraham Lincoln lived, right? That really wasn't that long ago. And so we're getting ready as a country to celebrate our anniversary. So we had the agrarian age. And back then we were moving from really being nomads into being farmers and settling in, growing our own food, figuring out some industries. For example, I remember in college learning about the cobbler. He made the shoes. And it was usually a he, maybe not always, but he would do every piece of it. So if you bought the cobbler's shoe and you had a problem, you'd go straight back to the cobbler, right? And he'd make it right, or she would make it right. And then we moved into the industrial age, and most of us have all heard about that in school. And that's world wars were really kicking in. And we had the, what was the Great Fall? Sorry. The collapse of the economy.
The Depression.
Thank you. Thank you. You're listening. Excellent. Yeah, so we had that. And factories started to come together. Assembly lines produced many of our products, especially as mostly male soldiers then went to war. And then in the 1970s, we entered even a new era. And that era is the information age. So think about this. You know, telephones changed. In the 80s or so, we started having cell phones. We had the internet. That kind of turned things inside out. Information was literally at the tip of our fingers. We just had to sort of dig through things and do a little bit of research. But it was a phenomenal change. But as of 2020, we are actually in the era of intelligence. It's no longer really the question of how do I find the information? It's what information applies to what I'm doing, and is it accurate? Have I vetted this information? Because there's so much out there that is not the same. And I've been doing some following of the World Economic Forum as they predict across the world how these changes are going to take place. And it's, you know this, it's not just the United States. And so with that, they said this will be the most transformational time in history so far. So taking a little bit of a closer look at this World Forum report, it was really taking a look at how jobs are going to change, how skill sets are going to change, and talking a bit about how organizations need to get ahead of that. And it's so interesting to me because we know that those who are in the technology field, they just sort of have an advantage coming up, right? But sometimes I think, what about the rest of us? What do we need to be doing? How do we learn and stay up with the changes? I know that many of you have already changed your case management systems in the last 5 to 10 years, and we know how challenging that can be. This new era is going to make it look like pie, I think. And so the World Forum says it's expected to create 170 million new jobs by 2030. That's just over 3.5 years away. But 92 million jobs are going to be eliminated. Just give me 3 people. What kind of jobs do you think could be eliminated? Customer service. Tell me just a little bit more about that.
So we use AI now to do a lot of customer interactions. I went to Burger King.
Okay.
My order.
Go ahead. Yeah, if you could repeat that, that'd be great.
Customer service skills. AI will kind of take over that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like I went to Burger King not too long ago, and they took my order. AI took my order, right? So.
Okay. What else have you seen?
Software programmers.
So what's changing there?
AI is going to be doing coding. I could go in and decide to build a website with coding, and I could use AI as a program as opposed to getting services from a software programmer.
And to that point, what I've read is the coder's job will completely disappear. We'll see if that's all true, and we'll see how fast, right? Because not everybody moves at the same speed, but it's certainly something to think about. One more?
Textbook writers.
Interesting. Tell me more.
Already you can look up whatever you want on the internet and you get a little AI synopsis of what it is. It's not a far leap to just have that all compiled into the information that students are learning.
And what we've learned is validate, 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 right? So look up those resources. When I use AI, and I use it almost every day, I make sure that it gives me those resources. I go back to those resources and I read them. But because I'm putting out information to people across the country, so it's important that that is vetted. So in your app is this handout, and I realize that this does not make the best slide, but this handout is amazing, and like I said, you can kind of blow it up. I have 1 or 2 copies if somebody wanted to take one home, or maybe you can print it when you get home. I found this fascinating. So Max Roser, a research, did basically a handout of change over time. So we could see not only where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And so if you look down into the bottom left where the star is, each one of those little circles represents 200,000 years. So you can see little things in there, and then it kind of goes zigzag for some more years by 2000 BCE. And BCE is just a simple way of not using a religious term for BC, before Christ. So, and then he really decided to stretch it out for the 1800s, this period of time that most of us can relate to from either family, history, and that kind of thing, because it's only a representative of how much things are going to change. So let's look at this. Shortly after 1800, the steam locomotive, photography, telegraph, electric light. We've all read about this, right? Antibiotics, the first antibiotic of penicillin. The first computers way back in actually 1950 or so, a little bit before that. The space station, the space movement, that's pretty transformational right there. And then we all have smartphones. Sometimes I'm a simpleton, and I think it's still amazing that I can be driving down the road and talk to somebody in another part of the world without a problem. It's still kind of amazing to me, but it's our everyday life now. And so in comes human artificial intelligence. They say that this is going to transform things in a way that we have never seen before. So I thought that this little graph was just interesting when you think about how things have changed over time. I myself will be watching it over the years to see what innovations are really there. And the World Economic Forum is holding panels and executive conversations all across the world. It's also been a little bit interesting to see how some of this is shifting and being challenged by the current state of security and war in the world that we've just recently entered into. Take it a little bit deeper.
Yeah, now we're going to look at the core skills for 2030. We thought this was so interesting. It's interesting to hear that it's coming at us so quickly, but it's also interesting to think about how we're going to adapt, which is what we've really tended to lean in with this session. So that's what we're hoping is going to be helpful for you. If you look in your app, you'll see, so you've got it's interesting because you've got emerging skills, and then mine says something a little different. It might say it a little different. Out of focus skills. That might have been cut off from our sheet. Sorry about that. Out of focus skills are over here in this bottom paragraph. So this bottom left corner. So if you look at it, reading, writing, and mathematics, we know that that's not really something we have to use anymore as much. Marketing and media, teaching and mentoring. We thought that was interesting because we do think there's still a need for that. But there's a lot we can learn online, right? So there's not as much of a need. When we look at the emerging skills, it says less essential now, but expected to increase in use. I like that. It's talking about how, look at this, networks and cybersecurity. How many of us have fallen prey to that, right? Some cybersecurity incidents, and knowing that we need to have those people who are not only skilled, but know all of the new technology that's going to serve us. So they're upskilled as well. Environmental stewardship, designer and user experience. I think that's so interesting. What she talked about, the coding is going to be gone. A lot of our court processes will no longer have as much input from court staff. It'll be mostly done by computer. And so we know that that's coming and we need to prepare for it. When you look at the core skills in 2030, I think that's interesting. Technological literacy we will have to have. But we'll also need to have resilience, flexibility, and agility. That's another thing that we're really trying to show you today is how to be flexible and pivot in this new era. And lastly, I would just say the systems thinking, leadership, and social influence, but also talent management. One thing we're going to be looking at today is how do we develop talent from within? Because we are going to have to move some people around, right? As you saw that there were, 92 million jobs that will be eliminated. And so we're still going to have employees that need somewhere to go. So we're going to talk about a lot of those things in just a minute, but we thought this was a really good depiction of what's coming.
Okay, so the Futures Report of 2026, so moving into the current age, basically says that this could roll out one of four ways globally. The first way might be that it's kind of supercharged progress. AI goes forward, it's working good, things are automated, everything's moving well. Industries, business models, workflows are updated real time, and all we have to do is sort of adapt those. I think this is a little bit more interesting in courts, right? Because we're a unique profession, but what could be adapted? Many jobs have disappeared. So let's talk just for a second. What kind of jobs, give me 5, what kind of jobs really quickly do you think might disappear in terms of skills, but not people? Please. You said photography? Stenography, right, court reporters, that kind of thing. And that includes, I don't know how many have still used stenography, but I know a few people who know how to use the old school, but it could be administrative assistants when things are automated. What else? What's that? You have the same thing? Okay, what else? Give me a couple more, please. Interpreters. To me, that's a big one, right? How cool it would be to press a button and you get the language. And we've been able to build into AI the court environment, the court, the way we term things, that kind of thing. And we know in many languages, not every word has a direct translation, but we could build it. What do we have over here? What did I say? Go ahead.
Our staff either answering phones either remotely or at the court.
Right. Answering phones either remotely or at the court. Yeah, that could all really, really change. Just think of what's already happening in your daily life that I'm not sure is even AI. We pump our own gas, we check out our own groceries. It's just going to be more and more. And I like to think a little bit about big picture. What does that mean over time? What does that mean for the individuals who are really getting skilled and moving forward, and the others don't have access to that kind of education, right? And how does that impact the courts? That kind of thing. So there's a lot to think about in this area. So the second way that this might all roll out is just an age of displacement. AI outpaces the capacity of the workforce, so things are kind of even going well, but things are moving faster than we can keep up with. Because we are a pretty traditional, law-based profession that things have to sort of happen a certain way. And things have to not just be put into place, but tested and make sure that they're functional and they work, because we all know the consequence that could happen to an individual if something didn't work, if the data was wrong. But thinking about court clerks, deputy court clerks who are entering data all day long, that are doing court minutes, things like that. These kinds of things are going to change dramatically, and we as leaders need to think about not only how do we want to move through this era, but how do we upskill and reskill. So you're going to hear those terms several times this afternoon. Getting our workforces ready. The third way that all of this might roll out, according to the Economic Forum, is kind of what they call this co-pilot economy, where we shift to augmentation rather than just automation. So what I mean by that is they can automate things. That's great. That could work really well for us. But augmentation really means we've got to make that new way fit the way we do work and or adjust the way we do work. And I remember when we were changing our case management system statewide, the word back in project management was that technology should not drive business, business should drive technology. How many of you had to change your business practices to meet technology? I think we're going to see more of that. All right, great. And then finally, the prediction is maybe it's just flat out stalled progress. So we can't keep up. It's moving too fast. I think all of these, I can look at positives and negatives and struggles that would come with this, but these are the 4 ways that they anticipate, regardless of the industry, this new transformational time could roll out. How many of you have a solid AI policy for how you use it in your courts? Oh, I'm surprised. I thought many of you would. I know some of you do. But you still sort of have to figure out what that really means, even if it's in writing. Excellent. Okay. So this is what we mean when we talk about the age of disruption. Everything's going to be changing. It may not be as we've always known it. We may have to figure out what kind of skills we need to recruit for, and how do we do that? How do we find workers with the right set of skills? And you all know courts is unique. So sometimes you might get a really skilled, a really educated individual, but then you've got to stop and teach them the court process, right? Or sometimes you get a court clerk working from another state, which is fantastic, or another jurisdiction, but you sort of have to give them time to catch up to the way you do it in your jurisdiction. So the age of disruption. So in this new era of intelligence, the world is changing faster than most human beings can keep up. And I like to think a lot about the impact on people. Because if our people are stressed out, if I'm stressed out, I'm not much good to others. If my staff are stressed out, that's not that helpful. We can't do our best work. And we know that that trickles down into the customer service that we provide, or maybe how we treat each other in the courtroom, even if we don't mean to. So we're struggling. All right, just shortly here, last year, shortly after we were able to give a presentation to the ICM fellows in Arizona, Thomson Reuters came out with this study, and they interviewed about 443 municipal, county judges and court personnel, and here was their discovery. So this is fairly new, just less than a year. Courts are facing significant shortages, operational inefficiency, and increased workloads. Has this hit your court yet? Show of hands. Okay, not everybody, but caseload complexities will increase. And I'm going to get away from it. Maybe we can make sure that one's off.
Turn it off.
So caseload complexities will increase, therefore case resolution flow.
That turn you off?
Okay. Looks like I'm not. There I am. Okay. We'll adjust. We're going to be doing a lot of adjusting here in the future. All right. So for some of us, we try to work long hours. I've talked to some judges I know in my own state that are just working weekends and nights, but they don't also feel like they can ask their clerk staff to do that, or their courthouse facilitators, or whatever the court position is, because you gotta set boundaries in this area. And then finally, we're going to get more and more technology gaps with strained budgets. I've had the privilege of working in Idaho for about 13 years. This is the first year, right after I left, that we have seen major budget slashes. Nobody's getting a raise. We're funding nothing except one non-funded mandate the court or the legislature put in last year. How many of you are experiencing just dramatic changes to your budgets? Okay. How many of you have a line item for adoption and training for AI yet? Okay. Thank you. All right, so courts must address, and this is going to be very familiar for you because you lead there, how do we adopt and adapt and adopt? How do we do that? And it just seems like you think you're moving along, then something new hits you from the left, from the right, from up, from down. And sometimes it doesn't seem like it stops. It's a lot to keep going. So how do we take care of ourselves? That's why Judge Engel is able to do so much, and she actually has a national group that is sitting at the table with her to help courts in today and in the new era with mental health, with wellness and resilience, well-being, and the changes. And then, how do we use AI to improve? Have anyone here, your court has actually sent you to an AI training? Couple, good. How many of you And not everybody has the ability, but I'm just curious, how many of you would spend your own money if you had to go get training? Okay, that's fine. And it's fine if you don't. I mean, that's a personal choice for sure. And then we need to allocate and recallocate. So as things become more an audit or more automated, we need to be thinking ahead. Well, if I don't need 6 clerks entering data, and for now I only need 5, what can I use that other clerk for? None of us want these employees to disappear. It's hard to find talent. And then upskill and reskill, as I said a little bit earlier, get them ready. How do you motivate them? So how do you inspire them in their heart of hearts? They need to know that you care about them, you're going to help them through the change, you're all in it together. We can do almost anything when we're all in it together. Do you agree? Yeah, it makes a big difference. You know when you're on a really great team. Okay, and then finally, change systems and strategies and structures. And so I kind of mentioned that when I talked about one example of changing your case management system. So what I'd like you all to do, find a friend or two just close by you. Make sure everybody has someone to talk to, and we're just going to spend a couple of minutes. Tell your colleagues, because you learn best from each other. You connect, and that's why we're here. So discuss skill gaps and resource challenges that you are already seeing in your courts. If you're working on some solution, that's a great idea. We get our best ideas from each other. And then I'll have a couple people report out afterwards. So let's talk about it.
I have one quick thing to tell you. It's going to get really loud in here because everyone's going to start talking. So I'll ask you to keep your voices lower and look for us up here when it's time for us to call you out, because it's going to be a little bit loud. So just try to keep your voices low, but please, it's so exciting to network and learn from each other, because that's where the wisdom is in this room.
Thank you. We have neighbors. Okay, let's go ahead and come back together. Since each of you really do have critical roles in the court, it is fun to learn from each other. So I'm going to ask a question, and I want 3 responses. What did you learn from your coworker? And if they offered a strategy that they're undergoing, tell us about the challenge and the strategy. Who'd like to go? And we're going to have Christine run a mic so we can all hear. Yay.
Thank you. So in our court, we're beginning to implement some AI, and we're also letting people leave by attrition. And we also have the funding challenges. So we're in a situation where we have fewer staff to do the work at the level we currently are residing in. And there's a vision toward more AI to replace that work, and we're not there yet. So that's the challenge.
Did you have any solutions for how you're going to try to get there, wherever there is?
Well, definitely.
Communication.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. We were talking to a judge this morning on the phone. He says it comes down to communication. So,
Well, and we have to move at a pace that courts traditionally don't move at, which is faster.
it's hard. We have a lot of processes. Who else? Back here in the back. Thank you. That back, and then we'll go over on this side.
And then there's one over here.
So one of the issues that we're experiencing is with the younger generation not having the ability to count change. they're so used to using their phones to pay for whatever they need. When a customer comes to the counter and they have to give change, they don't know how to do it. So now I'm tasked with that interviews. Hey, do you know how to make change? If I give you this, what would you give me back? So I don't know if AI is ever going to change any of that, if we'll ever go cashless. But right now, where we are cash, we receive cash, and that's a skill gap that is really prevalent in our courts right now.
And the penny's going to go to wherever the desk phone went, right? Things are moving and changing. I really appreciate that. I have a friend who's a police officer, retired, but he does a lot of traffic investigation in the state of Washington. And he said one of their last group of recruits, it just went not well. And this was a couple of years ago. The young recruits coming in have only driven hybrid or electric cars, and they don't know how to manage a gas power vehicle. So just another example. I think we had one over here.
So, kind of an issue with certified interpreters, having the ability to have a wide pool of certified interpreters to be able to represent or translate all the different languages, specifically dialects, or different kind of subsets, and being able to have that representation within a court system.
So what is your court doing in particular in that area?
We are not doing anything really. I think in large part, I mean, it's the funding issue, right?
Right.
You have to be able to get the correct amount of funds to be able to have that. Our Supreme Court does have a certified interpreter program. One of the things we discussed, though, is that you're still kind of left to your own devices to be able to then go down the list and find one, and you don't always have the time to do that. I know some courts hire on staff. We haven't been able to do that, so.
Right. Right. And so many times we're implementing software even today without any training. Staff just kind of have to figure it out and work together. So thank you for that. I'll take one more and then we'll move forward.
Oh, I think, okay. That's like,
Did I miss somebody? We'll take two more.
two more.
Right. We'll take here and then
Just wanted to
here.
comment on the interpreting in the courts. The judicial branch in Minnesota, we implemented remote interpreting. So many of our interpreters are at home, but through technology, they're interpreting in courtrooms all around the state. And that's definitely helped. We had that problem too, trying to find certified interpreters to go wherever in our large state was
Right.
really tough.
Right. Okay, one more over here, please. Come on, Christine. Get those steps in.
Well, our court is in Georgia, in DeKalb County, the judicial circuit. And we've kind of touched on all of our issues, but one thing we discussed was the sort of the challenge with hiring new talent when we think about what's required for a lot of our jobs. If it's, just a high school diploma, then it's kind of hard to promote from within. And then when we're looking at recent grads, we're not attracting that talent, especially if you think of like information technology, IT. They have an expectation to make a certain amount of money that we don't have, or be remote or hybrid, which we can't do. We're an in-person operation. And so that becomes a challenge. But then, like with the funding, our budgets are are just becoming more and more strained. So when you mentioned having a line item for AI, like we're struggling to keep our software and equipment. So it's a challenge with getting the other branches of government to understand our specific needs, and also get that talent, and also get them to understand that we're doing the best we can, but we're also trying to be transformative and innovative with not being able to without the resources.
Right. And I believe that many, especially in the government industry, many others are struggling as well, so they get it. But when we can't get what we need, it's frustrating, even if we understand the slowdown or the challenge. So thank you for all of that. We really appreciate it.
So what's the connection between leadership styles or the way we lead and preserving the rule of law? Well, it's interesting. If you think about it, leadership affects so many things. The leadership of the court might affect morale in the court. You know, if you have a pretty effective leader who can show some emotional intelligence maybe and actually can lead the court without fear, but maybe with vision, you'll see a lot of different things happening in your own court. And if you have the opposite, you might see something that's not quite as healthy. And it really does seem to be top down sometimes. But what I would also say is I think it's also from top down from the layers of our court too. So it's not just the leadership's position. It's not your CEO, CFO, chief judges, presiding judges, whatever you call it in your particular jurisdiction. It's also how all of us lead and show up. I would say that manning the deck and steering the ship has become much more important. This new generation that we just talked about, you know, as far as hiring and having new skills that they want to bring that maybe aren't really matching with the courts, or maybe we're looking for something and they're saying, I want all remote, and we're having to pivot and say, that's not what we do here. Some courts are doing that and they're meeting them there. I think it just depends on some of these new generational things that are coming in with our workforce. It also comes in with the change we're having to, as leaders, figure out how to help our existing workers pivot, because we've heard about how fast the change is coming. And so if we're not ready and we don't help everyone get ready and support as they're changing, it can be tricky.
There you go.
Thank you. So effective leadership style really does affect staff stability. So when I talk about effective leadership style, if we have some issues with leadership, then what I just described is staff stability. We might see some attrition. We might see some people leaving because they're not feeling like they're valued or heard. It could be the younger generation saying, this wasn't what I thought it was going to be like. How many of us have heard that? I've heard it, right? This is not what I signed up for. But it could also be our older people that are in the job saying, too much change, I'm out. I'm retiring early. How many of you have seen that happening, right? So to prevent that, we do need to think about how are we going to show up as leaders in this new paradigm. It also, then the staff stability will affect the court functioning. You're seeing my dominoes. These are all connected. So the court functions a little differently when we start having unfilled positions. You see people running from courtroom to courtroom, trying to give customer service, trying to be a clerk in different courtrooms. It's really hard downstairs in your customer service and other divisions. You know, you're sitting there in finance and you're like, I just need an answer on this bill. Well, I'm sorry, Susie's out and I don't know, you know, it's just new people. We've got a new staff. How many of us always use that? I've got a new staff. Let me get back to you. I mean, this is happening, right? And so that can affect the way the court is functioning. Oh, sorry. And then public experience and public trust. So if they're not having a good experience, they're also having less trust in the courts. And we've seen that already. From my perspective, I still pro tem sometimes, and I hear our judges talking about how there's less confidence in the courts these days. And so we're watching it from a national level and from a local level. We're watching it change and evolve very quickly. And I think when we see that, that can really affect how we need to show up in a different way. So when you look at how that can erode the rule of law, I'll give you an example. So when I was on the bench, I would think about how preserving the rule of law was really about me making my best decision, right? I mean, I'd make sure I was thorough. I'd make sure I had a great ruling on the record so everyone knew what I was saying for appeal purposes or just for myself, just making sure I was clear. But what we have to realize is that all of the things that the public is looking for happened way before I even took the bench. It was coming in security and being frisked by a new officer that didn't know that attorneys can bring in cell phones, something like that. I'm giving this kind of a silly example, but it was coming in and asking customer service, where do I go? But there's nobody at the counter because we were down about 5 positions and nobody's there. It was going up the elevator, finding my courtroom and walking in, and my clerk is freaking out because she's got Zoom and she's got in the courtroom people waiting, you know, so she's trying to manage it all. And you can tell she's stressed, so then they get stressed because there might be a little bit of, I don't know, just sit down, let me talk to you in a minute. So what you're seeing is when you watch it all, what we realize is how we're serving the people, how was it fair? Was the staff competent? Did they hear what I was saying? Were they fully functioning? Was it a stressful experience for me? That all comes into play when we look at public trust. And so the reason I think it's tied to leadership is because how we lead is how we see our court rise or fall. We can either reinforce confidence in the system or we can erode it. And so I think that's important to point out. So let's look at this next slide, leadership qualities for the new era. So these are qualities, not the styles yet. We're not there yet. But qualities, I want you to take a look at this. So in the new era, we're seeing differences. What do you see? Somebody tell me what you see that's different. Give me a theme. Does anybody see a theme? Right. It's much more collaborative. I heard someone in the back when you were talking, I heard you say, well, you know what, they need to be able to ask for help if they don't know the answer. Maybe they mess up and they need to know, like, well, how can I do it better? I heard someone saying that. It's a lot more building in and developing talent instead of I'm telling you to do this, right? Because with all this change coming, I want you to think about it. How many of you would agree with this statement? A lot of people go to work for the court because it's stable, secure. Is that true? We're in the elevator going, I got 5 days and I got 4 hours and I'm out of here or whatever. You know, you run into those people in the elevators. It's like, I got 2 months, 1 day, but they know what's in front of them. So that's why they showed up, guys. They showed up for a stable job with a pension. They know what their hours are. And now you know what we're telling them? We're showing them basically what Eileen just said. Get ready. This is all about to change. And that has been such a hard thing, even just in our local jurisdiction, changing over case management systems. I remember the pushback we got from staff because it was so hard. They didn't want to do that. Why fix it if it's not broke, right? So we've got to think about that as we're going into it. Instead of being directive and control focused, really doing some team building and buying in. Here's the thing. This new generation also brings us a lot of new ideas and energy. And a lot of creativity that we haven't seen in a while because they're coming with this new thinking of, hey, I want to make this job my own. They're also coming with, hey, I think I can see the answer to this problem in a different way than you can because they're coming at it with fresh eyes. So I think sometimes we've got to remember that the buy-in of who we've got in our court, they're right there. Let's tap into them. But how do we do that? Well, so there's some common leadership styles. I heard one already mentioned, I think by DeKalb. Georgia, she was saying transformational. That was one of them. Let me just show you all of them. Well, let's go through the list. I'll go through the list. Autocratic, top down. How many of you guys feel like you've seen that type of leadership in your courts? It's like, do what I say. Not rudely, but just like, this is the order. You do it this way. I don't really need a lot of input. There's the democratic, participative. I would say this is more a group sort of mindset. They're really trying to find out my department heads, what do you guys think is the best situation here? I don't know, I'm not working there, so tell me what really is gonna work here. That's more democratic. You're gonna be the ultimate decider, but you're still gonna go into that leadership style thinking, I really wanna hear from my staff and see what's going on. Transformational, change, innovation, and inspiration. I think this is gonna be a really good style to sort of layer in because we're gonna need it. Think about Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos. Think about how what they did with their team was they were constantly pushing them to create new things. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the iWatch and all of those things, right? They were always talking about how can we be better? How can we push this technology further? We're gonna have to think in certain types of situations like that as a transformational leader. Then there's laissez-faire. Does anybody ever know what this is? Have y'all heard this before? There's a lot of leadership articles that'll list this as one of the styles. Somebody tell me what you feel like that means, laissez-faire. Okay, I love that response. Had a little opinion in it, I like it. All right, so yeah, it's sort of like I'm hands off. I want you guys to figure it out. I'm gonna turn it all over to you guys. I'm here to man the ship, but I really want you to come up with all the solutions and bring them to me, right? So that's another type of leadership style. And there's so many. You guys, I'm sure, how many of you read constantly about leadership? I mean, maybe just me and Eileen, but I'm assuming a lot of people. There's a lot of leadership styles. These are some of the topics, the top 4 or 5 that I've seen. And this is the one we're here to talk about today, which is coaching. Curiosity and team building. It's something new to add to your toolbox. We all have a lot of tools. We all have different leadership styles that we use for different situations. I can't say that I'm exactly one of these leaders, but I might use it in different situations, right? If it's a high stress, high pressure, and it's we got to close the court. There's a security threat. I'm not going to coach and go over and go, what do you think we should do? I'm just curious. What kind of strategies do you have? That's not going to happen, right? But there are situations that can have a huge impact if you use this strategy in your toolbox. And one of them is the changes are coming. So we need to think about what that looks like. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything for you guys. I want to show you what coaching, well, let me ask you this. When I am leading, this is a question I want you to ask yourself. When I'm leading, I tend to blank most of the time. Styles that I have up there. What do you think? When I'm leading, most of the time I would say yes in the back. Oh, we need to get you a microphone. 1 second. Christine's coming. Sorry. Thank you for volunteering, though.
Thank you, Christine. Ask questions.
It means questions?
I ask questions. When I'm leading, I tend to, most of the time, ask questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. How about somebody else? What do you do? If someone were to describe you as a leader in one of these styles, what would you say?
Engage in collaboration and get buy-in.
Okay. So Katina might be using like a democratic, and she probably is using, some of you might be using coaching without even really knowing it. You don't probably call it that, but you're trying to build from within. You're trying to help someone find some self-confidence and develop that employee so that they can handle what you're handing them. That's coaching. We probably do it every day. We're just going to dive a little bit deeper so you can see what it looks like and how we can use it intentionally. Did you have the microphone for a reason?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Just hanging out. Yes.
No, I was just going to agree with the point that you made that it's situational. When I'm leading, I tend to really go by what the situation is. In the courthouse, when we're managing, when we're responsible,
Right.
say for a operation, we have to be strategic in our approach and which leadership style we are using. But I think from the top down works in certain situations. With my team, we're absolutely more transformational and coaching.
Oh, wonderful.
And we work together to it's our pillars. So we focus on our mission and our pillars, and that typically drives our decision making.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, so I think that's important. What she's saying is we use them in different times, and you're not going to use this all the time. And we're going to look at what do coaching leaders do. We ask instead of tell. We build problem-solving skills through partnerships. I love the last one, developing people, not just managing tasks. A lot of leaders you might find might actually be more task-oriented. Have you ever met one? That maybe isn't thinking about the team and you're over there going, hey, so-and-so, I'm just thinking, what about how this affects everybody else in the room, right? So, there's a lot of things we have to manage. These are just some awarenesses I hope you'll have. These are some really good skills that you can actually use when you are looking at coaching. What are some things we need to do to use a coaching style? Pause before reacting and regulate yourself first. How many times as a leader have we heard something new that we're like, oh, I got some fear. That's going to cost money. I don't have people for that. I'm just going to say no right away. Nope, I don't think so. Instead, with a coaching style, what you would do is pause before reacting. Ask yourself, am I leading from fear right now? Can I just put on my thinking cap for a second and listen instead of all of a sudden shutting this down? Ask before advising and active listening, being curious. Being curious in a conversation instead of thinking what I'm going to say next because you need to hear this is really important. If you can visit with your staff and your direct reports and you can actually have this moment where a lot of times this is going to happen in the hall. It's going to be, how many times as a leader do you get the, hey, how do I do X, Y, and Z? And you're like, wow, I just told you how to do that, but okay, I'm going to tell you again. What about asking this in the hall? What is your struggle? What's going on? What's keeping you from doing this? So really opening up your questions and starting to seek advice from your own people instead of always thinking that you have the answer and you're going to solve it and then run in the courtroom for judges or run into the meeting that you have, down the hall. Partnership, grow with, not done to. And I think we've talked about that. That's a team building. Accountability and support. You know, if they say they really want to grow and change and they really want to meet the expectations that you're trying to get them to upskill and reskill for a new position, help them do it. Help them by supporting them and finding out what support they need. Instead of saying, listen, I think I'm going to send you to a leadership conference. How about what do you need to really support you in this role? Because what they might need is something you hadn't even thought of. And they might say, I need 2 people to teach me how to do Excel spreadsheets in a much different way than I'm doing them now. And that's not sending them to a leadership conference to do their actual job. So thinking about those kind of things and always focusing on forward action. When you use a coaching leadership style, it's asking open-ended questions, and I'll get to that in a second. It's being curious, and it's listening, and it's also helping them figure out how to move forward from A to B. How am I going to get you there? What's in your way? What's a roadblock in your way? And also, what support do you need? Eileen.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit about the difference between mentoring and coaching and really acknowledge there is room for both. But as leaders, it's important. Sometimes we kind of refer to it as which hat I have on. And how do you stay in the coaching mode? When is it appropriate to mentor? So I always like to think of coaching as being a thinking partner. You know, helping people think about what they think is the best movement forward. And then that's much easier for me to coach and said, you know, what else have you considered? Really get to know them. You'll understand your employees way better through this method and let them work through it. And as Sandra already said too, what are your obstacles? How can I support you? And then mentoring is really the opportunity to tell people how you did it. And maybe that's what they need to know. So we do a lot of work teaching coaching skills to judges. And sometimes a judge just says, you know what? They called me, they took a recess, they just need to know the answer. That's a mentoring opportunity. And honestly, if you start coaching them, you're going to probably raise their anxiety because they need an answer quickly. So just being able to jump back and forth in between these different leadership styles, connecting them with people in your organization, you know this, that they kind of, you know, connect with, have similarities. Maybe it's true at times. Sometimes an individual will listen to somebody else probably a little bit more than they'll listen to me, and that's okay. So how can I make them be successful? And then Harvard Business Review defines coaching as a practice of asking questions to help people discover answers that are right for them. How many times has somebody told you what to do and you're sitting there quietly thinking, that's not going to work for me. You don't understand, you know? And you're trying to say, okay, how do I take that and modify it to what I'm doing? But if they would just come alongside you, be curious. And the other thing that's really important in this line is making sure you understand what words mean to people. Somebody can tell me, I want a collaborative style. Well, give me some examples of how you do that. I want to hear, what does collaboration mean to you? You know? So that can be just super helpful.
So we've talked about what coaching is generally, some of the skills involved in it. How about when do we use it? We've talked about when sometimes we don't use it, but when we do use it, development of employees and managers, that upskilling and reskilling we were talking about. Guys, we can't use the old approach of I'm gonna move, John, you're gonna have to move to customer service. I'm sorry, there's no need for court monitors anymore. That's tough for John. That's not what he signed up for. A better approach might be, hey, John, we're thinking about moving you to a different division. I'm curious, what are the things you love about your job right now, right? And not that we're gonna handpick a job for every employee and be like, okay, John, you wanna go to probation? Sure, I'll move you. That's not what I'm talking about. We're still gonna have ultimate authority, but how about let's inquire with our talent and find out who they are and what they're bringing to the table. We might find out that we might have someone that's very talented in some of the AI and IT that could stay in the customer service division but help with all of that because they have that skill as a background. And maybe we weren't in on that interview and we're not even clear because our courts are big. Some of the smaller courts, you might say, oh, everybody says John probably is not going to be able to do anything but customer service. Why don't you talk to John? And let's find out how we can develop John and get him to where you need him to be as you're upskilling and reskilling. Performance reviews and performance conversations is another really big area for this, because how many times, guys, are we talking to our direct reports and we're seeing the things that they're really good at and the things that they are really coming up short on? And when we do that, we can also start to look at those performance reviews with an eye towards what's coming down the pike. When we're going to have to absorb positions and move them around, we might be missing, I call them the hidden stars. We might be missing the hidden stars by not even looking at what we've got right in front of us. Wow, this employee keeps nailing it at all of the internal meetings we're having. I think they might need to go up to AOC and start really looking at how we can use them to really explain what's happening in our court. They have those skills, and that's going to get us more money for one project. I think those are the things we have to start looking at instead of just pigeonholing. We're going to start coaching and finding out who we've got with us. Not only who we've got with us, but how do we develop them and help them build their skills and confidence to do these new jobs that are coming. Mentoring with a twist, I put that in there because, I'll show you the next slide. Coaching hat versus advice hat, be clear. Mentoring with a twist is, we're all going to mentor. I mean, guys, it would be really a nice world where we could just say, I'm going to coach all day. For me, it would be really nice because I love it. But I'm just going to coach my employees all day. Well, that's not realistic. We also, as leaders, have to tell them what we need them to do, right? So we're still mentoring them and showing them by example. But we need to be clear that the most important part is we're looking at these areas of change where we're having to really bring in new skills and new ideas and change. It's really nice to start with a coach approach. In the conversation, let's say you're in the hall, and let's say IT manager is there, and he's saying, this program isn't going to work. I'm sorry, but it's just not going to work. So I'm freaking out because we're supposed to roll this out tomorrow. Instead of saying, well, shoot, because you don't have time, you've got to run to another meeting, take the extra minute to just ask him, what's the biggest challenge you're having? Sometimes having a thinking partner that's coming with some curiosity instead of fear can shift that conversation. And as he's sharing what he really needs to tell you and the real challenge, you can hear something different. So I guess I'm just saying, we do this a lot anyway, but do it more. And the skills, I've got a little sheet that we've typed up that we've downloaded to the app, or we're going to. And it's 7 powerful questions you can use with your direct reports and your colleagues. And guys, not all of you are leaders. Some of you might not be leaders yet. These are things you can use with your colleagues. These are things that you can help them unlock the goal that they have, that they can give the court by just asking a few simple questions. So really shifting out of autocratic, even laissez-faire, even transformational, and shift into a curiosity approach, especially when you are even mentoring your people in your court. How do I coach? I put this up here as a court model. It might be helpful to you. Clarify the issue is the C. So that means I'm in the IT, I'm standing in the hall with the IT guy. Let's call him Bob. So Bob and I'm standing there and I'm like, okay, so what he's telling me, in my head I'm thinking, I think he's telling me that the system can't roll out on time. So Bob, let's clarify. Are you saying that it's about timing, or what is it actually about? Can you tell me what the real challenge is? Do you see how I just kind of opened that up for him? And he goes, no, it's not about the timing. It's that our systems are overloaded. We have to upgrade and we don't have the money for it. So see how I just uncovered something totally new? Open-ended questions. Instead of saying, well, we can fix that, right? No, that's a closed-ended question. What ideas do you have that'll help support this project? Do you have any ideas we can really hang on to? Yes, I do, now that you've asked. I just haven't been able to get in your office because you've had a line out the door. But yes, I do. Understand his perspective. He's really freaking out. We got a deadline coming up and he really needs your ear. So listen actively, hear what he's saying, and understand his perspective of where he's coming from. Reflect on strengths and options. Listen to also the glimmer of hope he's giving you when he says, yeah, I think I got this. Now, how many of us will have that coaching conversation and they'll go, I don't know what to do. What's a good coaching question you could ask after that? An open-ended question if they go, I don't know what I can do with this situation. What could you ask them? Anybody? Okay. She said discover some options.
I don't know if anybody else does this, but if you did know, what would the answer be?
Love it. That's a great coaching question. She said, if you did know, what would the answer be? That's a great one. Another one might be, what support do you need to help you find the options? Right? Because what you're doing is you're moving him forward. See the T, take next step. You're moving him forward. You also don't want to take that monkey on your back and walk away in the hallway, because we all, as leaders, have too many monkeys on our back. Don't take it from him. Let him have some support on how he can figure out what options he's going to bring to you. But I think this is really just a simple model for you to think about your coaching practice. And, coaching, this is an interesting thing. We have a lot of resources out there, guys, for you. There's leadership books. There's Harvard Business Review, Forbes articles, there's YouTubes. There's all kinds of things that you can really dig into. I like this. This is Timothy Gallwey, who is a coach and a writer, an author who wrote about inner management. And I think it's really interesting, his definition, unlocking people's potential to maximize their own performance. It's really helping them learn rather than teaching them. I always think of it as a coaching style is me teaching you how to fish, and
Coming.
so that we are able to help them reach their potential and in turn help maximize our court's potential as well, since leadership is a top-down thing. I just want to give you 2 cautionary measures. One is there's a power differential. Remember, when you're coaching someone, you're asking them to be vulnerable and share things about themselves. Like, I'm sharing some ideas with my boss. You also can hire and fire, and you can also give them a bad performance review. When there's that hierarchy, please try to meet them where they are. And if you say this is a confidential conversation, or I'm really listening to what you're saying, then really do so, because there is that differential. And also time, but just a couple of extra minutes can actually make a difference.
Thank you. Do we have any input from our online team?
Yes, we have a question from the chat online. We have a question from Anya Crossland from the Wisconsin court system, and she wants to know, what have you tried that's been successful?
I think communication is a big skill. What I've done personally with some of the judges that are struggling with this is we've used one assessment that we use called the DISC. Eileen and I are certified to give that. So we've been working with them on communication styles, looking at who makes up your leadership team and how can we communicate differently so that we can maximize everyone's potential instead of just assuming they're just like us. So looking at different perspectives, shifting lenses and looking at it from a different perspective is really important. And so I think that can be one way. Eileen, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think there are different things for sure. And one of the tips that we like to give that we simply learned from somebody who's better at what we do than we do, because we're all on this journey to get better, and that is what questions. When you ask a what question, it opens up the thinking. So that is a really good tip. And honestly, sometimes you're even like really busy, you're trying to settle in, you're trying to listen to this person. If you just ask a what question, they're gonna start talking and kind of give you a moment to focus. So sometimes that's really helpful. The other thing that we have been doing is productive pair coaching. So we'll take a chief executive officer, maybe it's an elected clerk, maybe it's a trial court administrator, and a presiding district chief judge, and do the DISC, as Sandra said, with them, and really get them to talk about their styles and dig in and say, what could you tell the chief about the way you really like to make change in the court? Just anything. Open up these conversations, because oftentimes they don't either do it on their own or they don't have time all the time. This does take time. So when we're coaching productive pairs, we really ask them to commit to putting the time together. And other skills, how many of you heard the question that starts with why is not productive? Okay, I learned that as a probation officer, because the minute you ask why, people sort of feel justified. Well, I'm not sure why, or I'm pretty sure if I tell you why, I'm going to be wrong. It just gives you that feeling, right? So open it up with what or how. So those are some tips that we've definitely had some success with.
Any other questions before we go to our next slide? We just had one question for you to think about. We know a lot of you have paper in your laps and a lot of you don't. So we've only got, I think maybe 2 minutes. I'd love for you to ponder this. How could coaching as a leadership style enhance your ability to adapt in this era of change? Remember, we're not saying you have to become coaches. We're just saying instead of telling, how about asking? If I had to ask you to walk away with a couple of things from this session, I would say walk away knowing that curiosity with your court is much more important than thinking you have all the answers and keeping your advice hat on all day long, because you're going to discover those hidden stars that we talked about. And when change is coming at you like a tsunami and you're like, you just want to go home and hide. Instead, do it together. Really open it up to your team and ask, guys, let's figure out how we can be 5% better in this. We don't have to solve the world's problems, but how can we improve our services by 5%? That's a really good coaching question that we ask a lot, because it's just trying to help them focus in on what can we do to improve. And if you're not asking, you're missing a lot. And so I really want you to know that that's another tool for your toolbox as a leader that can be super helpful that we don't talk enough about. And the way we want you to do it is a little more intentional than you did in the past. So how could it help you? Does anybody just want to answer? I could take two answers, and I think that's about all I got. How could it enhance your ability? Can you think of a situation you have right now that this might be a better approach than just sending out that memo saying, we're going to do X, Y, and Z? Yes.
What caught my attention was the traditional style compared to the new era is using patience, because we're so used to problem solving immediately. That's where a lot of people in this room are used to that. So I think taking that pause, that step back, and we all have to, especially I need to work on being more patient on certain situations, and our roles change depending on what the issue is. But I think patience is a really something that we have to change.
And I think the irony of that is we know it. It's hard to do, right? It takes practice.
It takes practice, and the world is speeding up to make us go faster. So it's really hard when you're in the hall and you need to have patience with that employee who's struggling to say, let me figure out how I can actually build them up instead of just giving them the fish. Let me take a few minutes and find out what's going on so that they can figure out their own skills and their own idea for solving this problem, because then they're going to be able to do it again and again and again instead of relying on me. So I think taking that minute or two and doing those things is really important. Patience is huge. And I'll tell you that neuroscience says that we can always create new neural pathways with practice. Remember how they used to say you could only learn a language until you were 14 or something? I don't know. And then they started saying, wait a minute, we're starting to see more activity in the brain where people are actually creating new neural pathways to actually change the way they're doing things, the way they're reacting, the way they're leading even. And so that's what I see in leadership magazines. And I would just say that I think it's really important to think about, if we can start practicing the patience, it might really wear you out in the beginning, but in the end, it's going to pay off in spades or in money, in some kind of money. Yes. Anything else, guys? Any other questions or comments about this question? Yes.
Okay. This is just one comment. One thing that we haven't talked about is multi-generational workforces, and I think that's a real challenge. But I feel like the generations that are coming up are more responsive to this type of leadership. So I just want to add that. That's my experience, and that's another positive about it. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Guys, we really appreciate it. Here's our contact information. Reach out if you need any follow-up or any support. We're here to do that for you, and it's just so nice to see all the familiar faces and new faces. Enjoy Albuquerque. Yay.
Thank you.